loves, this is Sierra Taylor for Creative Cake Art, and we are making a, you guessed it, football helmet cake today, just in time for the fall and the football helmet wearing weather for some people anyway. So I have a real football helmet, and the reason why I have a real football helmet is because I just find that it helps to have a physical reference for the thing that you are making, so that you can get a measurement of the dimensions, you can see the different parts, how they look, and it helps to add to the realism of the cake that you're making. So the other reason why I have a real football helmet is because I'm going to show you a little bit later the way that we make the face mask. The best way, the easiest way that I found to make it is to lay it over the actual face mask on a football helmet and to let it dry that way. So this is just one that I bought, and I'm actually going to take back because they are not cheap. This is about $100, but you can just get it, you know, use it as a reference. Make sure you leave the tag on. We're going to cover it in saran wrap so as not to mess it up or get anything on it. And then when you're done with it, you can just take it back to the store, or you can keep it for whatever weird activities you like to do in your private time. Okay, now we need a bowl, because once we put this up like this, you want to be able to, for it to be held steady. So I have a bowl, and I'm just going to set this inside of the bowl. And then I'm going to take some saran wrap and cover the face mask. The other thing about covering the face mask, you want to do it tightly. Okay, because that way your gum paste face mask won't fall down into these cracks. And then also we use skewers to hold up the face mask, or to hold up the gum paste face mask. So by making this really taut, you can stick the skewers inside, and they will help to support while this is drying. Okay, I'm going to put one more piece for a little bit more stability, and also to cover up the top of the helmet, just so that nothing weird drips down on it. And it'll help it stay steady on the bowl, in the bowl too. Okay. That should be good. You could do one more if you like, if you're really worried about not being able to take this back because you jacked it up. So just do one more piece and bring it all the way down to the bottom here. Okay, so that way your football helmet can be completely protected. You can also do a piece on the back side if you want, but I think this is fine. Now what I have here is just a little bit of pastiche that I tinted gray and mixed with gum paste. The reason why I mixed it with gum paste instead of just using the straight pastiche is because pastiche doesn't give you much time to work with it. It'll turn brittle fairly quickly. So that we have a little bit more leeway with making our face mask, I mixed it with gum paste, but that still allows for it to dry really, you know, fairly quickly and really stiff. Okay, but you can just use one or the other depending on how much time you have for it to dry too, because obviously gum paste is going to take a little bit longer than the pastiche. And if you need to know how to make pastiche, we have a pictorial for that, free pictorial. So you can just go there, get the recipe, and you should be good to go. Also, you want to make the pastiche like right when you need it. You can give it about 24 hours. The recipe that I use has egg whites in it. There is a recipe that Elisa Strauss uses where she doesn't use egg whites. I haven't tried that one, but I think that that would be better if you want to make it a little bit ahead of time, because she says that can keep for a while. So you can go check out her information or her website, and I think that you can find that recipe there. All right, so now I'm just going to take a piece of this off. I'm using a clay extruder. Most of you know what this is, but if you don't, it's a Macon's clay extruder. You can get it at some cake decorating supply stores, or you can get it on Amazon. It's about $12, and it comes with all these little different discs. So the disc that I'm using is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the hexagon disc. I did pay attention in geometry. Okay, and the reason why I'm using the hexagon disc as opposed to just a round disc is because I find that the round one, it just moves a little bit too much for me. So I think the hexagon, because it has like straight edges, it helps to keep everything in place here. Now, the reason why I have this Crisco, you may be wondering, is because I want to put it here. So you just slide it over. This is the other reason why you need the saran wrap. So you just put it on top of the football helmet mask. And what this does is it also helps for your gum paste and pastiche mask to stick. Okay? So do that. I'm just gonna roll sausages of this out. And make sure you put it back in saran wrap, because again, it will dry out on you. So just do that. So for this first piece, you want to stuff this as full as you possibly can, because you're going to need a long piece of fondant, because you just want to do it in one swoop. So we're going to do this underlying structure here first, this U shape. Also, you want to get a little dish of gum glue. You could use water, you could use royal icing, something to help glue the pieces together at the intersecting points. And then you just put your top on here and screw this on. Okay, and then you're going to need the skewers. And the skewers, again, are to support. So you'll kind of see, once you start to put your face mask on, you'll see where you need to put the skewers, but I'll show you where I put mine. It's just a couple different places, mostly on the sides here, where these will kind of just like begin to fall down if you don't have something up under to support them. All right, so then you just get to extruding, baby. So you just do this right out on the counter and kind of pull a little bit. Don't pull too much, because you don't want to stretch it out and thin it out, but just, you know, let it lay flat. Don't let it get like bunched together. Just keep going around and around. Okay. Like that. And then I like to do one little, just roll, kind of smooth it out a little bit. Make sure everything is nice and even here. Okay. And then what you want to do is just take this and just lay it over the top. Now I'm going to put these two pieces here while I situate the bottom part. Only because if you put them there, they're not going to stay and they'll rip. So situate your bottom piece and then bring that up and push your skewer in. And all the way to the other side too. Okay. Put one more skewer here for a moment. The reason why you want to push it to the other side is because if you don't, it'll just kind of like flop over. It won't really hold it how you need it to. Side. Make sure it's on here correctly. And then bring it up. And We're gonna need one more skewer for this. I'm actually gonna put this on the top side and then bring it through. Don't push too hard because you don't want this to be like really bumpy. You want it to just kind of lay more or less straight, because if you're pushing it in, it's gonna be like, you know, it's gonna be wavy when it dries. So a little bit of wave, cool. A lot of bit of wave, not as cool. All right, then cut that piece off. Try to cut it flush with the top piece there. Okay. And then just making sure that this bottom piece is good to go. If you need to stretch it out and straighten it out a little bit, do so now. So this is the thing, you're gonna like go through, straighten it out, get it how you want. There will be a little bit of lumps inevitably, again, because it is laying over something, so you can't get every piece of lump out. I don't think. If you can, please send me a tutorial on it. But for the most part, you can stretch it out, get it to your liking, and this is why we don't want to use just pastillage, because it doesn't really give you the same work time as the mix of pastillage and gum paste. The thing is, the way you can tell what you need to do next and kind of get your structure right here is you just really look at how the football helmet, how the pieces cross over one another. So this is the bottom piece on the mask, and then the next piece that goes over is this first line here, and then this second line here. And we're not going to do this side piece until we put it actually on the cake, on the football cake. But you could, I just chose not to. I think that's fine to go on. And I think this top piece is fine to go on with the cake because it's going to be sitting up against the cake. So that's okay too. And we're actually going to put it underneath our helmet. So if you can see, like, this first piece is on top and the second piece is underneath the U shape. So it's okay to put the second piece on, and it's okay if it's not dry. Like, it doesn't really need time to dry because we're going to attach it to the cake. So again, the next piece that's going to go on is this top piece, 1, 2, and 3, going horizontal across. And then we're going to put our vertical pieces on here, and then we're just going to let it dry. It's done after that. So that's fairly straightforward. Can never get this thing off. The thing about doing a football mask that is overlaid onto an actual football helmet is that you're going to need to follow the dimensions of the football helmet that you're using as an example. Because if you do a football helmet that's larger, you know, much larger or much smaller, then the mask that you've used is not going to fit. See, that's the thing. So it's good to have the football right here in front of you, or the football helmet, because then you can carve everything to the dimensions, to the exact dimensions, and then once your mask is dry, you'll know that it'll fit. And if it is a little bit off, it'll just be a little bit off. It won't be like a thing where it looks crazy and you know that it's not really attached. If you do it without taking that step, then you are not going to be able to bend the mask to fit it all once your football helmet is all carved and done. So just be aware of that. Now this piece doesn't have to be as long, but I find that the best way to do this is just extrude everything out and then you can cut it as you need it. Alright, I'm going to put a little water where I know it needs to connect on the intersecting points, and then just lay it right over top there. Push in a tiny bit. Don't push too much, because if you thin this out too much, it's not going to be very sturdy when it dries. And trust me, I've been through all of this, so I know you don't want to thin it out. Keep the ropes nice and thick. So straighten that out, and I like to just give it a little bend there, just how the football helmet is. Same thing on the other side. Don't let this piece hang for too long, because as it hangs, the weight is going to pull it down, so you want to get it stuck to the Crisco and to the saran wrap, and then bend it up how you want to shape it. Okay? And then we're going to do, not this piece, but now we're going to do this crossbone piece here, all the way down. I find that like the football helmet part of this cake is definitely the most difficult piece. I mean, once it comes to like the carving and everything else, that's more like fun. That's kind of easy to do. And carving takes a little bit of observation, I would say. But the football, once you get the mask right, then you pretty much got it. I mean, it doesn't really matter if your football helmet looks like exactly how a football helmet looks in shape, or, you know, when you carve it, if it's not exactly right. If your mask is right, then people are going to be like, wow, that's a nice football helmet cake. If your mask is wrong, you're going to get the exact opposite effect. People are going to be like, what in the hell is that? And so I was like, you know, looking for just tutorials and examples of football helmet masks, and I just felt like it was never, I mean, it was always done okay, but I always felt that whatever was there could have been better. And I've seen some really awesome football helmet cakes, but they didn't come with tutorials. And then I've seen some tutorials that were okay. And then I've seen some other really awesome football helmet cakes, but as I'm looking at it, I realized that the person didn't extrude or make the mask at all. The mask was not edible. It was actually just an actual mask taken off of a football helmet and placed onto the cake, which is okay, fair enough. But I feel like when you're doing a cake, for me, it takes away from the fact that it's a cake when everything is not edible. It's like, you know, the thing is, you take the cake or you give it to somebody and everybody automatically asks, they want to know, that's edible. That's the main question that you get. Is that edible? That's edible. You can eat that. You can eat everything. And when you say yes, you know, like, you feel great. You're like, yeah, this is all edible. You can eat that thing. And then if you say no, it's like, oh, well, okay. I mean, anyone could have done that. Like, what's the point in being a cake if you can't actually eat everything? Not that you're going to eat everything, but, you know, that's the whole point. You're a cake artist. You're not a, you know, metal and plastic welder. All right, I'm off my soapbox. No judgment. then make sure that everything is straight and aligned. When you put those two pieces on, it may kind of move things around a bit. Press that down a little. And you may have to stretch that. Okay, and then take this little piece and just stick it in there. And straighten it out. You don't want it to bow in any way, but you especially don't want it to bow this way. If it's gonna bow a little bit, at least have it bow outward, because that looks more realistic. Again, it's always these kind of like little detail things that you want to pay attention to. This is what makes the difference in an amazing cake and a mediocre cake. Sorry to say it that way, but it's true. So if you want to give it a little bit more stability now, I mean, this is done because it's pretty much exactly what we have here. But I think for a little bit more stability and just a little bit more detail, we could do 2 more pieces, and then you just want to do them halfway, like where the eyes are, you want to do them halfway in between. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that actually. For dry time, if you're using fondant for this, you definitely want to give it much more dry time than the pastillage or the pastillage and gum paste mix. A pastillage and gum paste mix should be anywhere from like 2 to 3 days to maybe a week. Shouldn't take that long at all even. But you know, before you completely remove it from the football helmet, I mean, give it as much lead time as you can. But definitely check it before you remove it. And then, oh, wrong way. And then if you need it, like if you have a last minute order, which you know you kind of shouldn't, but if you do and you need it to dry within like a day or 2, definitely use all pastillage, but be comfortable enough with this, maybe practice it a few times, you know, getting it on there quickly and straightening it out. I mean, pastillage isn't like the devil. Like, you're not gonna have to hurry up and work with it, you know, within 2.2 seconds, or it's going to, you know, ruin your life. But you do need to work quickly, so you need to be comfortable with what you're doing. But if you have a lot of time and you want to use just fondant, fine. I would tell you, do not use Wilton's new fondant for this, because it will not dry even after a week. I don't even know how long it will actually take to dry. I'm going to say never. It is not the thing you want to use for this kind of a project, for anything that needs to dry hard to be almost freestanding essentially. Wilton's not your man for that. So don't even try it. But I'm just going to eyeball this because this piece is too big and I don't want it to tear. But yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, but anyway, you could use fondant. You know, just make sure you use a fondant brand that will actually dry. However, I'm not recommending fondant, but you could if you liked. Just be aware of all the different types of drying times. So with this piece, same thing. You're going to need actually a much bigger ball of fondant to get this to stay up, but you just stick that right in there. And this is, you know, this is also why the Crisco is good, because the fondant will just stick right onto the Crisco and hold that up. If you do need a little extra support, just stick a skewer under that fondant, but that should be okay for you. And then again, I'm just eyeballing this. You could measure it, but I'm eyeballing halfway between these 2 points. Okay, press in a little bit. Oh man, don't cut your Watch your knife. Don't cut things that aren't supposed to be cut. And then take your fondant. I keep saying fondant, but you know what I mean. And place it in. And just push it down so it sticks to the Crisco. Okay, do one last look over. Make sure everything is straight, lined, sitting where it needs to sit, poking out, tooting, and not sinking in. And then that's it. And then you just let it dry, and we are going to move on to our next step. Woohoo! I just want to show you guys how I prep the cake board. So what I started doing, because I found it to be more economical than covering the entire board with fondant, is to just paint the board with non-toxic paint, of course. So this is like preschool paint from Michael's. I'm using green for football field. All right, so I did that already. Let it dry. I just put like 2 coats, that's fine. And then I have a piece of fondant that I like to call the no-eat fondant. And this is fondant that was, it got a little bit too hard on the outside because I probably didn't wrap it good enough. I'm not saying that I didn't, but maybe. Anyway, so now that I've like re-kneaded it, it has like these little tiny bits in it. And this is the kind of stuff that, I mean, you could save it potentially and still use it on your cake, but instead of giving myself the anxiety trying to get all the thousands of little hard bits out of the fondant, I just use it for stuff like putting it on the cake board, stuff that no one's gonna eat. Doesn't really matter if it's not perfect. So I'm gonna design this like a football field, and I'll just show you how I roll that out, and then I'm going to use white modeling chocolate to cut out the numbers, only because it's easier to cut. It doesn't drag or anything like that. So I'll show you that too, and we'll put that all on top of the cake board. Numbers that I printed off of the internet. All I did was I googled football field numbers, and it gave me this cute little font for football field numbers. So I printed it, I cut them out here, and then I rolled out a piece of modeling chocolate because, like I said, it cuts easier. So we're just going to take the numbers, and I think this is really cute because this is where you get to personalize the experience for your client. Instead of just putting 50, 40, 30 yard line, I like to put it where it will be the client's birthday or the date for whatever their special day is. If you're doing this for like a groom's cake, then you can put the wedding date. So I'm just picking a random birthday, mostly because I have a limited amount of numbers. I mean, I have 1 through 5 and a 0. So I'm going to pick 0, and I'm going to pick 1 for January, because that's my boyfriend's and my grandma's birthday. And then I'm going to do a 0, so I'm going to do 01, 25, so January 25th, 1943. So it'll be 01, 25, 43. Alright? I'm just going to cut these out one by one with my modeling chocolate. Okay, so all of these are done, although I don't want to put them on the cake board yet because I want to get the football helmet on there and put these on as a last detail. So I am just going to set these to the side and let them harden up real quick. Or not real quick, but while we finish our football helmet. I know what you're thinking now. What is this ginormous mountain of cake looking nothing like a football helmet and way too big to actually even be a football helmet doing here? So let me explain, because there is an explanation for this. This is my rendition of a 7-layer half sheet cake with a dome. I just use like cake scraps to make a dome on top, and I kind of like put it together with different quarter sheets, kind of like a puzzle, which is way more complicated than it actually needs to be. The reason why I did it this way is because I originally baked these as quarter sheet cakes, because I have more quarter sheet pans than I do half sheet pans, so I thought I was being clever. Anyway, it turns out that for me, I feel more comfortable having like a big hank block of cake and then carving what I need out of the cake, as opposed to having something that's, you know, just the right size and then, you know, not feeling comfortable with the carving. So this way, I'm going to cut a lot of this cake off. You don't have to do it this way if you don't want to. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is that so with the football helmet that I got, the mask is 7 inches tall. So that like front part of the mask is 7 inches. So I need the front part of my football helmet to be at least 7 inches, which this is. And then I want to have this to dome up. And then I need for, the mask is actually 10 inches in length, or wait, height, length, yeah, 10 inches in length. So I need for the front of this to be 10 inches, which it is. So this is actually 15 by 10. A half sheet cake would be around 15 by 11 or 16 by 11. It kind of varies, you know, depending on where you go. So this is pretty much a half sheet. Now, to make this simpler, what you could do is just bake enough 7 layers of a half a sheet of cake, or even if you wanted to build it up just a little bit more, you could go to 7, 8, 9 layers. Or to save yourself a little cake, you could take what you cut off of your domes and put it up here. Either way it works, just make sure that your measurements are going to fit the mask. That's the main thing, okay? So the way that I supported this underneath is that I have one cardboard, let me see, you can see it here. So I have one quarter sheet cardboard, or actually, this is probably about a half a sheet cardboard here, so that the front, so you know when you cut a football helmet, there's that front like hood part that sticks out, and that may or may not need supporting. I think it's better safe than sorry, so I want to give it ample support as opposed to not giving it enough support, and you know, you put the fondant and all that stuff on and that part starts to fall in, especially if you're delivering the cake somewhere. You don't want that to happen. So I'm putting this to support that. So when you carve this, you're also going to have to carve through the cardboard, so make sure you have a good serrated knife for that. And then the other support is actually a round board, so that I don't have to cut through too much cardboard, but you could just do another quarter sheet or a half a sheet board if you want. But I just put a round board right in the middle of here, which is, so I did 3 layers, and then there's a cardboard here and dowels there, and then I did the 2 more layers, and then, or I'm sorry, yeah, 2 more layers, and then that board that you see right here. And then this little cake is just because I needed something as a filler here. So I put another little bit of icing and some more cake that I had left over there. All right. And then I just went ahead and put the cake in the freezer so that it's set up well enough for us to get carving without it starting to completely, like, you know, fall apart and be very crumbly. But then you don't want it to be too frozen either. So put it in the freezer, I say, for, you know, about an hour, hour and a half. I have a deep freezer, so it freezes pretty quickly. I probably don't even need that long, but just however long you need to make it so that it's stiff and good for carving, but that it's not completely frozen so that you can't carve through it. All right, then I have, my next thing that I have is a ruler. because you didn't know that. So this is a ruler. And I just want to make sure that while I'm carving, I give myself somewhat of an idea of what I want to do. All right, so when you start to carve something, it's better to carve it bigger than you think you're going to need it, and then kind of whittle your way down. So your first couple cuts need to be leaving a generous amount of cake still there. You know, don't cut it exactly how you think you want it to be, because then you'll go back in and, you know, with some fine tuning and cut all those little extra scraps off that you don't need to make it fit the shape that you want. So I have my ruler with me just to make sure that I'm not going overboard with my initial cuts. Now, like I said, I know I need this to be 10 inches here, and it is just about 11 and a half. If I'm starting from here, it would be just 11, but then I have some extra overhang here. So I know that I want the front to stay right at 10 inches. So I can cut just a little bit off the front. Okay, so I think that's it as far as the explanation of why this looks like this. I'm going to start carving and I'll explain to you as I'm carving what I'm doing. But I'm more so going to just be, you know, thinking of how I want a football helmet to look and just going for it. So, yeah. And again, like I said, it always helps to have a football helmet in front of you. I know how I want mine to look, so I am going to go ahead and get started with that. I also have underneath here my usual, it's just saran wrap to make sure that as I'm carving and this is falling, everything is falling off, that there's something to catch it. So cleanup will be super easy. You just pick that up and put it in the garbage. Okay, so first cuts. First things first. I'm going to leave the front for a moment, but I want to kind of get this rounded area going a little bit. Keeping in mind that I have a piece of cardboard here that I need to cut through. I'm actually going to cut this straight across here. And then I kind of just like am in my mind drawing what the helmet needs to look like. So I know this needs to be the curve. So in my mind's eye, like I draw it up and around. So then I know where I want to make and how I want to make my next cut. I grabbed my phone because if you don't want to sit the football helmet here, or even if you didn't purchase a football helmet and you wanted to do it without it, you could just have a picture of a football helmet on your phone. So I'm actually going to just sit that here to help me as a frame of reference while I'm cutting. I'm going to get this piece for my lip next. When I say lip, I mean like the little brim. Okay, and then I want to kind of bring it around after that. So let my brim come here. It also helps, like I think this is a good strategy, is to cut with your knife, or like make a little groove with your knife so you know what that shape is going to end up like. And then bring it around here because you have that little part of the football helmet that kind of sticks out. So let me get this cardboard out of the way. And if you have a super long cake like this, you can always do one side and then do the other side and then come to the middle. Okay. This isn't exactly the depth that I think I want to do, but I'm going to leave it for a minute until I get more of a rounded shape, and then I can kind of tell what needs to happen next. If I cut this how I think it needs to be, I may cut it too far. It may be too far for like how the roundedness of my helmet ends up. So generally, I think what I've learned about carving, what I know about carving is that you want to have a gross shape. When I mean gross, you want it to be like the general like silhouette. You don't want to do too much here, not enough here, not enough here. You want to kind of whittle it down, almost like woodworking. If you ever see a woodworker do things, the wood kind of like whittles down evenly all the way around. It's not like where I'm like here, boom, 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 boom. I'm like working my way around. You get the point. Anyway, so I'm going to do kind of do the sides and the back now a little bit. now at this point, my face mask has had ample time to dry. So what I can do is, just to make sure, I can take it and measure it up gently. Measure it up to my helmet and see how it fits in. Okay, so that's actually, all right, so now you can see there, that actually fits in pretty perfectly. So now I know I don't want to do much else when it comes to my helmet. I don't want to cut this down much more. I'm going to do a crumb coat on this, and I'm going to refine it a little bit after it comes out of the freezer. But generally, this is the height and the width that I want. If I cut down this width anymore, then the face mask is going to have a little bit of trouble fitting. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good though. So now gently take my face mask and place it back. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Gently again take my face mask and put it back. That's not something you want to do if your face mask hasn't had like more than enough time to dry. But if you're sure that it's dry, feel free to measure it up, and that's really the best way to tell if you got your carving right. Your cake should be pretty soft at this point, so you just want to make sure to put enough icing so that you're not tearing at the cake as you put the crumb coat on. Your icing will also help, especially your crumb coat, will help round out your cake. Any of the areas that don't have enough like cake filling in or any little divots, your icing can fill in. And then I'm gonna ice this entire cake in ganache, only because I feel like it helps with keeping the fondant smoother. So once I put my ganache on, that'll help too, to really get a better rounding on the top as well as around the sides of the cake. I tend to take my crumb coats very seriously for whatever reason. I try to make them perfect, but let's keep in mind, mostly I'm talking to myself right now, that this is just a crumb coat and that there is no need to make it perfect, not whatsoever, because actually once we get this out of the freezer and do it and carve it down a little more, we're gonna have to do another crumb coat. So this one is not even really that important at all. It's just to kind of set everything in so you can see what it looks like with icing, you know, get a better idea of what it looks like with icing, and then you can go in and do your final set of carving with that idea in your mind, or with a visual, really a visual to see what it's going to look like when it has icing on it. It kind of helps you bring everything together, because, you know, before when you're carving, like you have pieces that are sticking out and pieces that are missing and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So when you put the icing on, it gets rid of all that negative and positive space and just gives everything like a, you know, fleshes everything out. So as I'm doing this, I can definitely see that the back of my helmet is lopsided. So once I go back in, I can really see where I need to cut that. So that's the point in this first crumb coat, really. So now I'm going to take this and let this go sit up in the freezer. Before I put this in the freezer, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking I want to add one more dome on here. Because I think it's just a little too flat on top. I think it would be better if we have a little bit more roundness up there. So I'm actually not going to cut this though. I'm going to go ahead and just ice it. Just put the crumb coat on so that once I bring it back out, I have a fresh, you know, high top to work with and get that dome exactly how I like for this last time. We have our cake out of the freezer, and it's more or less about, I don't want to say room temperature, just maybe a little bit above room temperature. We let it set. It's not completely frozen. It's enough so that we can carve it, but it's still soft enough so that we can carve it as well. And so in looking at it, now I can get a better idea. So I knew that this back part was going to be kind of weird, and it doesn't really, it's lopsided basically. Just spare you all of the details and just say it's lopsided. So I need to go ahead and take a look and see how I want to cut the rest of this down to refine it and get it to, you know, where I'm happy and I feel that it looks like a pretty decent football helmet. Oh, also, I decided that I'm going to use scissors to cut this board because that makes it a lot easier, in my opinion, than trying to cut it with a serrated knife, because then things start to move around a little more than you actually want to. I mean, you could use scissors, you could use your knife. Just make sure that your scissors are clean and that they're food safe. I mean, you can use a nail file for all I care. Like, as long as you get it done. Sometimes you just, you know, you got to go to work on Myra's toes. So that is what we are doing, and we gonna figure it out. Secret that I have a little bit of an issue leaving well enough alone. However, I'm looking at this as I'm getting ready to put it in the freezer, and I noticed that something seems off. Now, it could be okay to just do it how it is, you know, leave it how it is, and it would probably be fine, but I don't want to be just fine, especially for you guys. I want to teach you how to do this in a more exceptional manner. So as I'm looking at this, I'm like, this kind of looks like a motorcycle helmet, not really like a football helmet. And here's why. Because if you look at a football helmet, it kind of has this, like it goes up a little further. So this slope is kind of shallow. A football helmet slope is more like a rainbow kind of an arch. So we need to build this up with a little bit more cake. So I have another quarter sheet of cake. Now, this is part of like what goes with sculpting. And again, this is why I was saying you should leave more and really evaluate and then take it off as you go. Now, unfortunately, I didn't evaluate it well enough because I didn't notice that until just now, but I noticed it in time enough to fix it. We didn't put any fondant, we didn't really put any icing on it. So this is where you really want to make sure that your cake is the shape that you want it to be. So yeah, since we're not doing a motorcycle helmet, I have another piece of cake to go and add on and fix it up a little bit to give it more of a slope. So I'm just going to add a little more icing to help the cake stick better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take, I think the best way to do it is to just kind of add 3 strips in here and then to carve it to round it out. So I'm cutting a quarter sheet cake into 3 strips. And this is probably going to break when I put it on, but that's okay. Okay, and then I can go in and I'm just going to cut on a downward angle. So we are going to take our melted ganache. It's kind of like an icing consistency, and we're just going to ice our, I was going to say frost. We're just going to ice our crumb coated, already and carved helmet. I think the shape looks great, so I'm happy with it. Once the fondant goes on, it's going to be even better. So we'll go ahead and get started with the ganaching part. And I don't usually ganache cakes that aren't like either square tiered cakes or round tiered cakes, but I think for this I wanted to try it out because I just wanted to see what kind of difference it makes when you put your fondant on. For something like this, we want to make sure that it's completely smooth and that the fondant lays well. And I think obviously that's achievable with buttercream, but for me, when you're doing a carved cake and you do use buttercream as your final coat, it can get a little tricky, only because buttercream is soft. So the ganache is soft, but when it sets, it'll be hard. But buttercream sets soft. So once you put your fondant on, if any parts of the cake or the carving are kind of sticking out or a little bit lumpy, then I feel like, it kind of shows through the buttercream still. Like the buttercream will still allow for your fondant to kind of mold to whatever that lumpy shape was. And with ganache or with candy melts, even if you wanted to do like something to this effect with candy melts, once you put the fondant on and once the ganache is set, it will cover up all of that. However you ice the ganache is how it's going to stay. And so your fondant will lay smooth over that and you won't have to worry about any cake lumps sticking out. That was like a very long explanation for what I was trying to say. But I just wanted to make sure you guys got my you're icing this, it's a good idea to make sure that you with buttercream, you can kind of let it set a little bit. I mean, you don't have to go right back and smooth it over. You can go do your kind of rough icing, get all your areas, and then go back and smooth the entire thing. Because, you can do that with ganache as well, but you can even see here, because it starts to set fairly quickly, especially if your cake is cold. It's a little bit more difficult to go back and smooth it out. So I would say if you see any like extra lumpy areas like I have here, just make sure you kind of get that as you go so that you don't have to have like a big fight with it later. And try not to do that, but you know what I'm saying. I think that's a pretty good rough cover. I'm noticing that it has a little bit of a slight bulge here that is not going on here, so I don't know if I'm going to think about this. I may or may not cut that down, But in any case, I'm going to smooth this out a little bit with some hot water. And as you may know already, the water in my house is super like freaking burn your life hot. And it's almost like boiling water. But if you don't have very hot water, if you don't have a sink readily available right next to you, you can just boil some water and put some in a bowl or a metal container right next to you where you can keep dipping your spatula, clean it off, and smooth your ganache with a hot spatula. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my water on and do that. I just used a combination, which I thought was great. I used a combination of smoothing, and you saw me kind of like sculpting there. So it is really great because it's almost like sculpting with a knife, except for it's even easier, and you can really get things rounded out and finish off your shape that you already carved exactly how you want to finish it off. And I think that this is looking really good, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it in the freezer and get this all cleaned up, and then we will come back and begin to put all of the fondant and embellishments on, and it's going to be wonderful. All right, so meet you back here in a second. Next step is we just want to take some black fondant, just a small piece, and roll it out because we're going to put it where the inside of the helmet would go, usually. Although there is no inside, we want it to sort of look like the inside. So just roll that out large enough to cover that inside area for you. And then almost just like paneling, you want to make sure that this is wet. So I put some water on that. And then you just take it in your hand. Actually, before I do that, I want to cut a straight line so that it sits flush with the board. And then just take it and push it up on there. And then you just want to bring it around, smooth that out, and then take your blade and just cut where the edge of the helmet is. And then you want to get this extra, we want this to come off first. So, when I say first, I mean you don't want like this extra stuff here. So, don't try, you don't have to get like a perfect cut on this. You just want this stuff off so that it's not pulling, weighing things down, and making your fondant job cracky. Is that a word? Cracky? I say yes. Okay. And this is black fondant, so I'm not particularly worried about getting any ganache in it. Okay. So just want to set that to the side. And then after that's done, you can go back in and make a more precise cut with your blade. And it doesn't even still have to be like super lined up, because once we cover this with the white fondant, all of that area is going to kind of be covered. So, I mean, get it as well as you can, but don't be, you know, you don't have to be anal about it, basically. Okay, easy enough. Now, just gonna take a clean paper towel, and I just want to blend it in a bit into the helmet. So I'm gonna push into the sides and also get some of that chalky flavor off the fondant. Also, it helps if you don't want to have too much overhang. There's really none there, but if you want to cut some of this overhang down and kind of blend it as you cut into the cake, that'll be helpful once you put your next layer of fondant on, because then you won't have any like lines to worry about from this piece. So just go ahead and cut that. I want to do the same thing to this side a little bit too, actually. Just because I feel like you never know where you could end up with a weird line. You don't want to have to be concerned about that later. So just do that, and then you can blend it in with a little bit of water. And it'll blend easier once the edges are thinned out. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm just going to cut it on a little bit of a bevel. And then blend it. We're in the home stretch here, guys. So next thing that we are going to need and want to do is take some either like gum paste, something that stiffens really well when it dries. So I'm using modeling chocolate. I just have some white modeling chocolate that I made from a while ago. Or you can use gum paste, or pastillage would be awesome too, because we want to just extend out just a tad bit the little like flaps here. So if you have the football helmet, you have that rounded part there. And I don't actually want to make mine rounded. I want to make ours have that triangular shape. It's a little bit more of like an updated version of a football helmet. It's a little more youthful looking. It's not like, you know, Brett Favre 20 years ago football helmet. So I don't even know if Brett Favre played football 20 years ago. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. It is more updated, a little more fashionable. Is that a word that you can use for football? It is now. So I think that it just brings a little bit of like pizzazz, a little edginess to the football helmet. If you wanted to, you could still do it with the rounded look to it. I'm just going to show you how to do it with the like ankle, like triangular trapezoidal look. Your modeling chocolate, and you can either roll it out or you can just kind of press it into the counter. So you want to get it, you know, nice and pliable with your hands. And then I'm going to get just a little a little powdered sugar so that it doesn't stick to my countertop. And I am going to roll it out a little with this rolling pin. So roll it out fairly thick so that you can cut 2 triangles with it. And you want them to be stiff because then you're going to put the fondant over it. You don't want them to be falling over and be flimsy. You want them to be able to hold their shape well. So just make sure that you leave this piece thick. I don't know how. I mean, maybe like, this is probably about between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch thick. But you don't have to measure, just eyeball it. Okay, so when I extend this out, I want to extend it just a bit because you don't want it to go beyond the point that the top of the helmet does, because if you look at an actual football helmet, you know, it curves over and then you have that part that comes down, but it's still further back than the top is. The top bill is there, so we don't want it to come too far out. We're going to use some of the cake and some of this to be that like side earpiece. So I'll show you what I'm talking about because I'm not doing an excellent job explaining. I realize that, so let me just go ahead and do it and you can see what I'm saying. Alright, so let's cut our triangle. You don't have to cut the triangle exact. I'm just eyeballing, especially because this is modeling chocolate and it's so easy to manipulate however you like it. Now, okay, let me look. I don't actually think, let's see. So if our piece comes down here, I'm trying to imagine what it's going to look like with fondant. So you have your piece that comes down here, and then you want to go down and just a little further down. So I think this might be a little too, maybe just a little too small. I'm going to cut this off because it has black fondant on it. So let's do another cut and do it a little bit higher this time. Okay, I'm not going to press it all the way in because I want to make sure I like it before I get the fondant on there. So yeah, I think this is okay actually. So I'm going to just cut it down a little so it's not sticking so far out, and then just measure it up one more time. And yeah, I think that'll be good. So I'm going to go ahead and press that in. And actually, before you manipulate this and really stick it on, what you can do is take it and cut your other side the same way. That way you can make sure that they're both the same size. And you don't have to worry about it looking lopsided. I mean, you can also just eyeball that, but sometimes when you eyeball it, it looks fine until you take a picture of it and then you notice that it's totally not fine. Okay, and then just to make sure, because sometimes both of the cake sides are not exactly even as they should be. Okay, or symmetrical rather. Okay, I think this works. So this is pretty sticky, so it's actually sticking okay by itself. If you need to, you can obviously add water. I don't happen to need to. So I just want to put these on. And again, if you're doing round ones, it would be super easy just to take a round cutter and to do like a half circle and put that there. Because I'm being a little adventurous today, I'm not going to use the round. But if you don't feel like being adventurous, by all means do. Although it'll look like the 1980s, it would still be fabulous. Looking at my picture, and you know what? I'm going to take these off. Because I'm noticing that in the picture, the helmet goes like this, and then it comes out a little further. So it's not like, you know, a slant down like this. It's more of a slant up, like it's not so steep. the slant. So our our slant was pretty steep like that, but I needed to be a little more like this. This, and then, let's see, and then kind of round it under like that, okay? This is why it's helpful to have pictures. So I have a little bit of black in here, but I'm not gonna even worry about that. I'm going to mix it back in. If you don't want if you're worried about your fondant or whatever turning a grayish tint, then just make sure you cut that black little parts off before you mix it back in. If you're going to redo this how I am. I'm going to put this in the freezer because I want this to set up really hard. I want the modeling chocolate to get really hard before we put the rest of the pieces and the rest of the fondant onto the cake. Now the next thing that we're going to do is just take actual fondant and make like our parts for the like indentations for the stripe, and do some stuff on the side here where we're going to cut out like air holes and ear holes and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to put black fondant and put stripes on and put embellishments, and then we'll put our final layer of fondant. I don't know if I'm going to want to lay it all at once. I think I might do it in parts, but we will address that shortly. Okay? Be right back. On to our next step, which is to build up the layering on our football helmet. So when you look at a football helmet, you'll notice that it has depth to it. So it's like you have like your ear pieces that stick out. You have on the top of the helmet, like you have your little racer line that's kind of raised and then has the color line over it. On the back of the helmet now, the more up-to-date helmets, you have like a back part that's kind of raised and comes down and around. There are many different ways that you can do it. What I did was I pulled up like pictures of football helmets from the internet that I liked, and I'm kind of doing a combination of several of the ones that I found. You could always do the older school one. So if you were going to do like an old school football helmet, or I mean it's not super old, like they still use it now, but it's the older style, is you could just round these out a little bit to make that part round. And then there's not much else you need to do. You would do like the raised racer edge here, and then you would do a raised circle ear part here. I'll show you, it's the same kind of process, the same kind of concept, whether or not you decide to do what I'm doing, which is a more up-to-date football helmet, or whether or not you decide to do an older version. So what we want to do to get that depth is we put on those raised areas before we cover the helmet with fondant. So for me, the way that I like to do it, the way that it works best for me, is if I take a skewer and I draw onto where I'm going to put things. So essentially you could do it with a template. You could do it with, you know, just putting it on and then cutting it, which is kind of what I'm going to do, but I'm drawing first. So I'm looking, you know, in looking at my pictures, and then I draw at the same time with my skewer. So I wanted to get, all right, like the front part. So I see from looking at my pictures that the front part kind of like goes out almost all the way out to the edge, and then it kind of like, let me see. Okay, so it's pretty wide. So it comes like out. It doesn't have to be like a straight line. It just has to like, I'm almost like sketching it onto there to get an idea of where I need everything to go space-wise. And then I know that I want it to come along this edge and then loop around. So I want this whole thing to kind of loop around to the ear section. And the same thing over here. So I just loop it around in my drawing, come back. Okay, some of the football helmets would like come to a point here and then start again. Some of them come all the way down. This one I'm just going to do a loop. And then I know that I want my ear pieces to be kind of triangular, so I have where I kind of mark them out there. I'm not going to completely mark these out until I put the front part on, but I know in general that they should be right around here and have this little circle piece. So I'm kind of just plotting everything out. It's almost like, you know, setting up for like building a house or something like that. Like you want your blueprint set out onto your football helmet so you know that everything is going to fit space-wise. So then I know that my line for my helmet, and this is again from looking at the pictures, I know that it comes down and it kind of just follows the line of the helmet that we already have. So this would come down to here, following where that extension is, and then come back around and like up this way. Okay. Same thing on this side. So it's going to follow this all the way to the point. So you follow that down to the point, and then it's going to, actually, not even that far down, about right there. And then come down here, and then come back up. Okay? Alright, so now that we have everything plotted out, you can go ahead and like start to put your, I'm using gum paste. You could use like modeling chocolate, you could even use fondant. The reason why I'm not using fondant is because the fondant that I have is so soft that I feel like when I start to try to mold the draped fondant around it, it may not hold its shape as well. So I'm going to use gum paste instead. But like I said, you could also use modeling chocolate, or if you have some fondant that is not softer than a baby's bum, then you could use that. I have my gum paste here, so I am going to start rolling it out and piecing it on. You could put it on in one big piece, but it's really not necessary to do it that way. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting it on in parts, just because it'll be easier. You don't have to roll out so much or worry about getting the chocolate into your white gum paste. I don't know how well thought out that was. You want to just make sure that you wrap your extra gum paste because it will definitely dry out. Okay, just have a little powdered sugar down. And for this, you don't want to roll it out too thin. You want it to be fairly thick still, actually, because you want it to show up when you put your other piece of fondant over, when we drape the large piece of fondant over the helmet. Now I know that I want this to be a little bit more, have more length and not as much height. So I'm kind of just shaping my gum paste out a little bit to be longer to fit from edge to edge. And that does. So grab a straight edge. I'm just going to cut this part, since I know I already want it to be straight. Go ahead and cut it beforehand. And then lay that over it. And I'm going to let it just hang down a little tiny bit too. Okay, and then I'm just following the line that I know is already there. I'm going to lift this up so I can kind of see where I'm going with this. And then I know this comes down and around. And then in order so that this will be easy to piece another piece onto here, I'm just going to leave myself with a clean, straight finish there. So the next piece will kind of just fit in. You'll put it there and cut it out like a puzzle piece. Okay, and then I'm going to do my other side. So I know, and also while you're cutting, you can be looking here. Cut a little bit down and then take a look and see where you're at. And then I'm going to come down this way. Okay. And I want to also leave myself with a straight finish here. Man, this little thing. Come on, buddy. So cut that straight as well. And same thing here. And if it's not sticking as much as it should be, then you can just lift any parts that need more water and put the water under. Grab yourself some more gum paste and keep doing the same thing, just as I am. 110% symmetrical, but since I know that once the other parts go on and the face mask and all that kind of stuff, this is not really going to show. No one's going to be able to really look at it and tell that it's not 100% symmetrical. If you do want it to be 100% symmetrical, you could always do, like I said, do a template first to make sure that everything lines up. But I think for our purposes, what I have here is going to be just fine. So I am going to leave it as is. I do want to get this front part a little bit better though, so I can tell that it's a little thin at the top on one side and a little fat at the top on the other side. So I'm going to cut that down a bit. What also helps too, if you don't trust your eyeball, or you want to see how it's going to look, you know, on pictures and stuff like that, is you can always just take your camera and snap a picture of it. And then once you look at your picture, you can tell if it looks okay. So let's see. Just snap a picture, snap a picture. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. So, all right, we'll leave that and continue on our journey. Have one last time on this other side, but we need to do the same sort of thing. to just continue to kind of work on it, clean it up till when you look at it, it looks symmetrical to you. And again, taking pictures always helps to figure out at what point that is, because you could really do this forever and it might not ever look symmetrical and it might not ever be symmetrical. But as long as it, you know, to a picture or a naked eye, it is symmetrical looking in the picture, then you should be just fine. So in my looking at this, I think we're good. The next thing we need to do is get some ears on this puppy, and I'm using modeling chocolate for that because the shape that I want to do with the ear sort of looks like the tip of an arrow, like a bow and arrow, or like a wishbone kind of a shape. So I'm using my phone as a reference to see what I want to do here. I have a little piece of fondant, and I'm going to just take an even smaller piece off and put it in a bowl and mix in some water. And then use like a palette knife or something to mix that together to make it like a paste, like a thick paste. A little more water. I don't really measure the water, I just kind of do enough to make a paste, and then if you need to add more fondant, like I do, just grab another little piece and keep putting it in there until you get the consistency that you want. You want it to be spreadable, but thick enough to sit in the crevices and make like a smooth cover. Set to go. We covered up the seams pretty well. The fondant should lay on there fairly smooth. The next thing that I'm going to do is grab our finished cake board so that we can move our helmet over to the finished cake board before we put the fondant on. Some people don't like to do it that way because they worry about damaging the fondant on the finished cake board, but I always do it that way. I don't think it's a big deal. If I have a cake board or if I have a cake that's going to be kind of difficult to move after the fondant is on, which I think this one would be, then I go ahead and put the fondant on while it's already on the cake board. So we'll just go over how to do that, and you'll see that it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, you shouldn't damage your fondant. It's been on there for a while, so it should be pretty hard enough that we wouldn't have any problems with it. All right, so we want to get some scissors, get our cake board and some more fondant, and we'll get to work on that part. Here's our cake board that we did. I did not stick the numbers on here yet, as I want to get the cake on before I put any additional things stuck to the board. So I'm going to just take our numbers that we have and leaving them in the position that we want them in. I'm just going to move them to the side while we get our cake on here. I cannot remember what these numbers look like unless I leave them in the order that they're supposed to be in, all these little parts. Okay, but remember our stripes are stuck on here, so that's not a problem. Now, what I would recommend, what I'm going to do and what I would recommend that you do is to just put some saran wrap down over your cake board so that when we move it, you don't have to worry about cleaning your stripes up. You can kind of position and reposition your cake as needed without having to get a bunch of stuff all over your stripes. By a bunch of stuff, I mean like ganache and black from the black fondant. I'm going to put 2 pieces, that way once we put the cake down it'll be easy to pull those pieces out. Alright, and then we need to cut down the board. Now you could use scissors. I'm going to use this blade because I think it gives a little bit more control, or I'm sorry, this serrated chef's knife. So you just want to be very careful with this not to knock your cake over, but you're going to grab, just put that over a little. Just pull your cake a little to the ledge so that you can get a good cut. Figure out where on your board you want to set it. Get a good idea of what part of your board is going to be the front, what angle you want. I think I like it this way. Not that they don't look exactly the same. Leave it to a cake decorator to find the better half of the exact same looking thing. Okay, and then look at your cake and see which side of your cake you think is the best. Although they all should really be the best. I want to just grab some adhesive. I'm going to use the stuff we were using earlier to help the cake sit and adhere there. Okay, now that you have it where you want it, you can pull the saran wrap out. Just make sure that you get all of it. I mean, there's a cake board underneath, so it's not a huge deal, but try to get all of it out of there. Let's move this up and out of the way so that we can roll our fondant out. And this cake is sweating because it's been in the freezer, so it's pretty wet at this point, so I think the fondant will stick just fine without wetting it. To cover this, I'm using right around 5 pounds of fondant, and it's pretty stiff, but I'm just going to use my hands to make it pliable because this fondant is so soft that if you put it in the microwave, it'll be too soft to cover. I mean, like, it just rips really easily. So we just want to roll it out. I like to roll it out in parts and then roll it together because the cake is so large, and we want to cover in one piece. I'm going to try to make this really big. You could use a measuring tape to measure. Just be careful here. So you could use a measuring tape just to measure from here, from the back of the cake to the front of the cake, and then around. and then you would get an idea of how large your circle needs to be. But for me, I'm just going to try to eyeball it. I don't really think I need to use a measuring tape. Hopefully I don't prove myself wrong. And then I'm just going to have these. Just want to get your smoothers and stuff ready. Okay, grab a little dab of powdered sugar and just put it underneath so you can keep your fondant from sticking. And then start the rolling. I'm going to let this set up in the freezer. This is on there as good as it's probably going to get for the moment. I do want to let these little pieces get set on there. And I also think that I'm going to try to lift this up just so that I can cut the board down, because this edge is driving me nuts. I don't like the way that it looks and I don't want it there, and I am just not into putting a border on it. So hopefully I can just, after I let it freeze for a little bit, we'll try to just lift it and see if that can't help us to get it all cut down. And if it's frozen, it shouldn't have too much of a problem with things shifting in areas we don't want it to. But yeah, that's just not, I mean, the rest of it, this looks great except for that bottom edge. So we'll get that taken care of. We have our cake back from the frozen abyss, and now I want to take it off of the board because I really need to cut this foam core board down, as I mentioned. Now this cake, Oh, it's kind of stuck and it's very heavy. So this is a little risque. I must say you should definitely make sure this is right before you put this down and put the fondant on, but I like to take chances, so I'm gonna go ahead with it. If it doesn't work out, I can always fix the cake up, but I just cannot deal with this board being sticking out and making the border look so sloppy. Success. Now, I'm just going to take a wet paper towel and smooth out this bottom a little bit. What we're going to do next is, okay, so when you look at a football helmet, this part here kind of curves in. It doesn't really sit flush with the, I don't know, the surface, the astroturf, if you will. So we are going to cut out that part starting at the bottom of this. This is going to get cut, and we're going to put in a piece of black fondant right along this bottom edge. So it doesn't even matter that our fondant isn't touching all the way there. That is actually better because we can fit the black fondant in, and it'll make it look as though the football helmet is kind of sitting up off of the surface. And then also there are a couple of areas where they have air holes, like here. I'm going to put 3 and 3 on the other side, and then right around this ear area we just want to cut out a little hole and replace it with a piece of black fondant. And we could just put a piece of black fondant right on top, but in order for it to look like it's kind of, you know, there's a hole there, you want it to actually be some depth when your eye sees it. So we're going to go ahead and make a mark with our skewer to know where we want to put those cuts, and just to make sure they're coming out where they should be. some black fondant, and I'll be right back. We need to take our black fondant and do our side slots here and just around our edge, our bottom edge. want to add, now that we have all of those kind of details finished, is that I wanted to do is what I want to do is that I want to add those little side cushions that are on the face, the little cheek part here, this little piece. And I'm just going to freestyle that. I'm going to take some white fondant and kind of put some indentations in it and then stick them here. Don't make them too heavy because these are being held up by toothpicks as is, but just to cover up this little area, kind of neaten it up a little bit, and that's just one more detail that we can add to make this look more realistic. So. Are finally starting to come together here. So excited. And the next step for us is to get our back piece put on here. It kind of just looks like a little, I don't know, it's like a little neck brace or something that just slants across the back. So that's fairly straightforward. This wheel, and I'm going to use it to cut out my strip of fondant. I just got it. So excited. I've wanted one literally since I probably started decorating cakes, and I've never got one until just recently. So this will be my first official time using it. But it's just it's a pastry wheel. I got it from Amazon, and you can use it to cut any length of like even ribbons that you want, and you don't have to use like a ruler on each one and try to measure it up. It's amazing. Now I'm going to grab some silver highlighter, which is not edible again, so you want to make sure that if you're using that, you're letting your client know that it's not edible. But I'm going to grab some silver highlighter mixed with a little bit of oil. If you need it to dry and you want it to dry effectively, you could do one coat with the vodka and the highlighter, and then to get the concentrated coat, or to get it like, you know, where you don't have to do 1,002 coats, you just want to use the oil in the highlighter. So you'll kind of see the difference. In our Cake College video, you can also see the difference between how the oil looks and how, like if you use vodka or you use vanilla extract, it has the tendency to be a little bit runny. And when you paint the silver on, it kind of looks splotchy and it doesn't really work that well. So I like to use the oil. However, oil also has another, it's like a runny problem, it will run down your cake. So you have to be careful with that. I have a makeup sponge because it just makes it easier to cover that top portion. It makes for easier coverage and more spreadable, and just like putting on makeup. I mean, if you use a makeup brush, if you're a lady, or even if you're not a lady, and you use foundation, you know that a makeup sponge helps with that. So I'm going to use it here, and you can see how you only really need to use one coat with the oil, one coat of the luster dust to get a nice coverage. Now, if I were doing this with an alcohol-based product, then it's not going to cover quite the same. Some people complain that the oil doesn't dry well. So like I said, if you have that problem, or if you care about that problem, then you can do it with one coat of vodka before you do it with a coat of oil. And I just take it as far as I can out to the edge without getting it on the black. You can always clean it up, but once you get it on the black, it's sort of hard to get it off, so try not to. See how nice that is? See how smooth that is? You just really don't get the same thing with a paintbrush and alcohol-based products. And you can even use the point on the brush to get in there with the precision of a paintbrush. So this is great. Just great. And I want to airbrush this a little bit. So I'm just going to take it and put a little square sign up there, very simple. And then, again, I'm not allowed to airbrush in my house because everything is like cream color. So I have to take this outside to airbrush a little bit of it. But let me just explain to you what I'm going to do so you can do it as well. I want to, okay, when you're airbrushing and you look at an object, usually the low lights versus the highlights. So the contrast or the low lights are within the areas where the light bends. So any part that has like a corner, a crevice, a line, a demarcation, some area that sits in as opposed to coming out is where you want to do the darker color or the shadowing. Now, I'm just going to use a little bit of like a grayish kind of silver, because if you look at white and you see like a shadow on white, it almost looks like a gray kind of a tint to it. So I'm going to go in and put gray like in this area, going to put gray in some of these areas, anywhere where I see like a line and I feel like it just needs a little bit. And I'm going to do just a very light spray to give that contrast and bring some depth and bring a little bit more life to the football helmet. And then, like I said, I'm going to put that little square piece here, and I will be right back so we can finish this thing up. It is looking very good, and I'm very excited to get it done. All right. We are now going to add a logo to the cake. I didn't want to use a team that's already established because I didn't want them to try to like have some issue with me because I used their logo. You never know. But I felt like the helmet looks kind of plain without something on it. So I found this very cool logo, which I am quite excited about. And I just looked up on the internet like black cartoon panther, and you can buy this if you wanted to at bradfitzpatrick.com. I had a little bit of trouble using his cart, but it's like 18 bucks, so it's definitely worth it if you wanted to use something like this. If you were doing this for a client and you wanted to use their favorite team, of course do that. Since I'm just doing this for a tutorial, I came up with this little baby. And then I wanted to use a different kind of number. So, you know, I printed out these numbers from the internet, and then I just Googled football helmet number font, and this is what came up. And I'm going to do the number 22 for my birthday. And so I just cut out one number 2, and I'm going to use that for all of my numbers, obviously. And I'm using a combination of white and black, and then the red is for the panther's tongue, and then I have a little bit of gray for the panther as well. This is all fondant. It would be awesome to do this logo and to do these numbers in modeling chocolate, but just keep in mind that you can't paint the modeling chocolate. Like, it won't take the regular paint, just like you know what, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, because I use oil in my highlighter paint, that might work on this. But for the moment, since I'm already here and I'm using the black fondant, I'm just going to go ahead and use the white fondant. But I know that oil colors, like candy colors, are oil based. So I'm kind of thinking, and I may try that later, that the oil mixed with the highlighter may work on to paint modeling chocolate. That would be awesome if it does. But anyway, what I was saying is that it would be a lot easier. You would get a lot cleaner cut if you use modeling chocolate. So if you have that available, or if you are interested in using that, by all means do. But like I said, just keep in mind that you can't paint. And because I want to paint my number silver, I'm using the fondant. Okay, and then tools are just basic, like water, rolling pins, blades, blah, blah, blah. I have one color shaper just in case, powdered sugar, and Crisco. And then I am going to show you how to cut this logo out and how to put it in layers so that it has depth to it. And we're going to do 2 of these. So we're going to obviously flip this over and do one for each side of the helmet. And yeah. numbers are finished, we can move on to the next step in our Panther logos. Okay. Sorry. I was like, wait, these are weird for a second. So when you are layering like a logo, some type of a cartoon, you want to do it two-dimensional. You want to look at how it is showing up and what colors are on top of what colors. So we already did our base color, which was the black, and the next thing that we need to do is this gray. That's the next layer color. Actually, it would be the gray, the white, and the red. But for now, we're going to focus on this gray highlighting fur. You could eyeball this. I have a tendency to do that, as you know. And I actually want to do it here. But so that you can see what I mean when I'm talking about the layering and cutting things out, I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this and show you exactly how you would do this with this logo or with anything else that you're using for the layering. So I'm going to just grab a pair of scissors and then start to cut around this gray area. right about here would be good. Just want to look at it from the other angles. Oh. Yeah. All right. Where's my brush? Now that's very fancy that I got black paint all over this, but I'm not worried about it because I can easily just clean that up real quick with some paper towel. I'm more so concerned about if these are even. So before I finalize anything, I mean, it's sort of final already, but before I clean up my mess, I'm going to make certain that this is the place where I want this to stay and this to stay. And I think so. So let's grab some paper towel and clean that up real quick. everything is looking swell, so we may move on now. The next thing that we are going to do is to put, I want to put something like a little football helmet cushion here, only because I was looking at some football helmets again and just examining to make sure we have everything in its place and how it should be, and I was noticing that there are usually some cushioning right around this top area, so I want to be true to that part of the design. So I'm going to take some pieces of fondant, just like I did with these little face cheek pieces, and just put them at the top and kind of texture them a bit. And then we don't have too much more to do after that. We just need to put, to do our chin guard, to put that on, and then to put our face mask on and flesh that out with another piece and the other side pieces that need to go on here. We'll clean up our board. We'll get our numbers on our board. We'll get those pasted down. And yeah, we are almost there. All right, be right back. Okay, ladies and gents, I cleaned up the board a little bit. I just took the same non-toxic green paint that we used initially and painted over it. And one of the last things that we need to do now is to form our chin guard that's going to go right around here. And for that, I am going to use modeling chocolate. You, of course, could use gum paste or fondant, whatever you like, as long as you have enough time to let it dry. I don't want to give this a ton of time to dry, so that is why I'm going to use the modeling chocolate. And also because I just find that it's easier to kind of mold it and get it into the shape that you desire without having it to dry out on you, because it literally does not dry out. The other benefit, I think, of using the modeling chocolate is that once we do, so we're going to do the chin guard and do the straps. Now, okay, so if you have your helmet already done and you know where exactly the straps need to be placed, then it's easy to do it, and to do it with a gum paste or, you know, with a fondant, because you can let it dry exactly how you need it to dry for your helmet. But if you're doing your chin guard ahead of time and your helmet is not yet done, then you want to do it with the modeling chocolate, because that way it will set, but it's also still a little bit pliable. So once you go to put your chin guard on, you can move the straps into place however you need without having to worry about them breaking as they would if you were to try to do that with, say, a gum paste or a fondant. Okay. Final countdown. 3 more steps. 3 more steps. 3 more steps, and we're done. Excuse my excitement here, but we literally have 3 more things to do, and this tutorial is finito. Not that it has not been a blast making it, because it has been, but let me tell you, this is a lot of stuff going on here. So I am very excited to be wrapping it up and seeing everything come together finally. Yay! Alright, so now let's get to it. Alright, we need to, so I have the mask sitting here, and I'm just going to move it out of the way because God, please forbid that anything ever happened to the mask. Something already actually did happen. A piece of it broke off. Okay, I'm going to show you how to handle that, so don't worry. But God forbid that anything actually happens to this. I would be entirely devastated. So we're just going to put that over there for safekeeping. One thing that I do want to do is, before we put the mask on, so our 3 steps is, I want to put on, I mentioned that I wanted to put like another face mask, not face mask, another, the inside cushion, like the helmet cushion like we have here. I want to put one up top here. And then we are going to extrude our mask, secure it, and put the whole face piece on. And then we're going to put the numbers on the board that we did earlier when we made our board. Okay, just kind of flatten it out, but don't make it too flat because you want it, again, to look like it can protect your head. So if it's completely flat, definitely not gonna do that for you. I'm gonna put down a little bit of powdered sugar. I cleaned up my board again, and I don't want to mess it up anymore, so I'm just putting a tad bit of powdered sugar. Okay, then I'm just gonna cut it here and measure it up a bit. So about right here. And then I want it to have a bit of a slant, so I'm just going to take my blade and cut that on a slant there, and on the other side. Alright, so it'll kind of go like this, and then once you know where that's going to go, I want to use my fondant smoothers and just kind of even it out a little bit. Then take some water, measure it up one more time. So it's going to go this way. So I want to kind of put, so in looking at a football helmet, is that not like the theme for this tutorial? Looking at a football helmet, if you look at that head cushion, that forehead cushion, it kind of has these little grooves in it where it's been bunched up. So to add an extra detail, I want to make those grooves. So I'm just going to use my color shaper and kind of just put lines in all around here. Okay, that looks good, and this is pretty wet, so I don't think I need to put anything on it. I'm just going to go ahead and place my cushion there. It's actually so wet that it doesn't really want to stay. That's the thing with water and fondant. Like if it's, water makes it stick to itself, but if it's too wet, it'll actually just slide down. So you may need to secure that with something for a quick second. Alright, I'm not going to get toothpicks. I'm just going to keep an eye on it and make sure that it's not falling down. But that's a more risky way to do it, especially because we're about to put this mask on here. So you want to make sure that it's not falling down and knocking your mask out of place, because that would be, again, a tragedy. Don't want that at all. We want to take a piece of white fondant. So we're going to extrude the last piece of the mask. There we go. I'm like, where did that K come from? So the last piece of the mask is going right across this front area, and it's going to stick down, and that's what holds, that part of the thing that holds the mask in place. So if you look at a football helmet, it has these two like screwed in pieces. So before we extrude the last piece of the mask to go on here and then to connect with this, we want to do those screwed pieces because they're sitting here and then kind of wrapped up around the last piece of the mask and screwed in. All right, so we want to simulate that or emulate that. So we just take a piece of fondant, and then I'm going to just put a little powdered sugar. At this point, you could probably just even use Crisco if you don't want to keep messing your board up like I am. But flatten that out. Pretty flat. You can roll it. It's such a small piece that it's easy to just flatten it with your hand. Okay? And then cut out a long rectangle. Okay? So a long rectangular piece. And then you're going to take that long rectangular piece and cut it vertically right down the middle. This one is a little bit bigger, so I'm going to cut it one more time so that they are the same size. Next, I just have a round, I think number 12 tip. Definitely number 12 tip. So take your 12 tip, and actually first let's measure this up and make sure. And I think that's really good for size. I'm gonna cut it one last time because I want these two pieces to be perfectly even. So I'm going to just roll this and then cut off the very top so that they are exactly lined up with each other. But then I'm going to unroll it and take my number 12 tip and cut a hole. And then take what I cut and hang on to it, because that is going to be our screw. Okay, so do the same thing with this one. Cut the hole and then keep it intact as your screw. Also, I'm going to smooth this down a little. Okay, same thing with this one. Now, you can take these. If you need to add a little water, go ahead and do. For these, I do want to use toothpicks, but I don't want to use huge pieces, just tiny pieces. Don't forget to let your guests know if you're using Q-tips, or let your client know and let their guests know that there are Q-tips or some type of wood in the cake and where it is, so that they can know to take it out before they give the piece of cake to people. Otherwise, if you're worried about that, you can also use spaghetti so that you don't have a lawsuit on your hand. That's not funny. Alright, so I want to put it like sort of at these two ends here. So I'm going to put this here and just push it in. And then just fold it up for the moment. And do the same thing here. Push that in first. And then push it down and fold it up. Okay, so quickly, before that dries too much, take your gray piece and you're going to put it in the extruder gun. And I'm using, so you just roll it into a sausage, you know how to put it in there. And I'm using a, what am I using? A hexagon, if I can find it. I'm using the hexagon tip for my extruder. It's the large hexagon tip. Oh, here we go. Hiding. So the reason why I'm using a hexagon tip for the mask is again because I don't want it to roll too much. Like I wanted it to be round, but not be so round that it has no traction. So I feel like if you do it with a hexagon, it gives a little bit of an edge on the corners, and so it won't roll off of your cake so much or roll off of whatever you're trying to form. Okay. Oh. All right, so as I mentioned, the helmet it kind of fell down a little bit. Well, it got hit on something. So the helmet got hit on something, and one of the pieces came off. And I was like thinking about it, okay, should I take all the pieces off? Like, how should I do this? So what I decided to do was I'm going to break this piece off, but then also I do need to cut these down too. Now, I kind of know where I need this to go, but if you don't know, you want to make sure that you measure this up to where it's going to be sitting so that you know where you want to put your final piece. So I know my final piece needs to come around here and then kind of come down. It needs to come around top here and then come down to connect. And I'm just going to put it right. I can actually make a little indentation here to know where I want to leave it off at. It's a very little indentation. And then do the same thing on my other side, because I know that I'm going to break this piece off. Then I only need to know this is going to come here, cross across here, and then come down to about right here. Now go ahead and extrude that right out onto the counter, because even though I like the hexagon shape, I like to soften it just a tiny bit by rolling it around on the counter before I put it onto the helmet. deal with the rest of this piece. Okay. Now, I would say you need something kind of like serrated, but I'm just going to use these scissors and hopefully this works out for my life. This makes me super nervous to cut this, but it has got to be done. I think I'm going to make a little thing and then try. I don't know what I don't know. All right. Nervous, I'm nervous. Let's try this piece. I think maybe I should like cradle it. Let's try. Jeez, I just don't want it to like hit on the counter or anything. It's like a really weird thing. I mean, it breaks off with no problem when I don't want it to. But now that I want to cut it, I'm like all feeble about it. Oh, I have an idea. Let's try and put a little water on it and see if that can help to soften it up before we cut it. I feel like that could really help us in life right now. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. Just a little water. So I'm just kind of screwing it so it almost like saws through. Whew, there we go. Get this connection going. Okay. Straighten this out a little more. Let's move on. Now we want to take our little screws here and just put in some indentations to make them look like screws. So I'm just going to do like a little X on them or a cross. And then I'm going to take a little water and put those in place. Very last of the steps. We just want to put on these fantastic numbers. So I am just brushing them with a little bit of Crisco. No, wait, I wanted to do 0, 1. So my idea, it said, was that I wanted to do the birthday. I don't know whose birthday this is, but whoever it is getting a fabulous cake. I know that much. This is a very old person too, because they were born in 1943. Sorry if you were born in 1943. You're not old, you're just seasoned. So we got 01, which is January. Then we got a 2. And a 5. Again, if you are taking this cake somewhere to a client, stick it down with royal icing, gum glue, regular glue, but just not this Crisco, because this Crisco is good for about like 5 seconds. Like, it's gonna be fine for my purpose, but if you're making this for someone, it is not going to be fine for your purpose. Alright, you guys, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me for this Tuesday tidbit. Don't forget next month to look out for this same magnitude of tutorial. It'll be your Lotta bit, and once a week on Tuesdays to look out for your Tuesday tidbit that is a little bit. Alright, I had a blast making this. I hope you guys have just as much fun and just as much success. I'm really happy with the result. If you do happen to have any questions, you run into any issues, or if you have any questions even about what we did on this video, please do not hesitate to ask me. That is what I am here for. Alright, thank you guys. Sierra Taylor for Creative Cake Art. Holla! Stop looking at me. You want to get me too? You're looking at me with the googly eyes. I want this to be, stop looking at me. I don't have. Yeah.